Hello, friends. Welcome to Fiscal Focus on DawnNews English. This is Danish Khan, and today I'm joined by Dr. Ammar Ali Jan. He's an historian and a scholar practitioner who engages with grassroots movements and organization in Pakistan. Thank you, Ammar, for joining me today.
Glad to be here, Danish.
So I want to start our discussion with the following. So there is a universal consensus in Pakistan that the development trajectory of Pakistan has been suboptimal in past 7 decades. But there's a lot of contention in terms of specifying what are the core reasons or the contradictions in Pakistan development trajectory. So I would like your take on it. How do you conceptualize core contradictions in Pakistan's development trajectory?
Well, broadly speaking, at independence, countries, post-colonial countries like Pakistan had two basic options, and this is a very universal kind of an experience throughout the Third World. One was a developmentalist trajectory, which meant that not only would you have to develop your industrial base, your technological base, in order to catch up to the West, which has historically denied development to the colonial world, but you would also have to fight those internal groups within society that were holding society back and who were beneficiaries of the system. So, kind of a social and political revolution as necessary for economic transformation. That was the kind of one path that was open, and this was advocated by nationalists, by socialists, by third world leaders. There's entire history of the Bandung Conference around this idea where leaders from the third world wanted this kind of a developmentalist path. And in that, they were coming into contradiction both with US empire as well as internal forces, including the establishments, including feudal landlords and others who were beneficiaries of colonialism. The other path open for countries like Pakistan was one in which these countries did this dependent development, which meant that they relied on the markets of the Western world and started providing cheap sources of raw material, primary goods, did not really develop their own industries. However, their elites, which were then called comprador elites, elites who were benefiting from this neo-colonial system, they started seeking rents from the US and other Western countries. So what that did is that truncated any kind of a long-term developmental project, because for this, you did not need any kind of social reform, any land reforms, any long-term industrial planning, any kind of educational setup that could develop the base for the technological development that was needed. And this path also meant more authoritarianism and dictatorship because the general move to of history, the general tendency since the anti-colonial movement everywhere was one of reform, if not revolution. And this trajectory foreclosed that reform. And in order to foreclose that, it had to use violence. Often, this whole mushrooming of US-backed military dictatorships across the third world is very much part of this history in which both the US and elites in the third world try to reverse the trend of history, which was towards redistribution and technological progress in the third world. And once these elites became dependent on rent seeking, it wasn't just limited to primary goods. It was also rent seeking for geostrategic reasons. So renting out your geostrategic location, which is something Pakistan has done again and again. And thus we got locked into this trajectory where we had a parasitic elite that was extremely rich, that relied on the West, but it was not productive. It could not bear its own expenses, and hence it would run the country, run society on borrowed money. And every time you had to repay the loans, they would place the burden on the working classes by taxing them, by administering austerity, by cutting social benefits. And I think that's where Pakistan is right now.
Yeah. You mentioned working classes and you engage with young people in Pakistan and also the working classes and labor movements in Pakistan. So two parts of my questions here. Part A, is labor or a working class still a relevant category to think about
Mhm.
politics and economic development in Pakistan? And second, what are some core issues faced by working classes in Pakistan?
Well, I think it's a very, very important category. Broadly speaking, what do we mean when we say working class, working people? We say the most productive people in society, because these are people who are not living on the labor of others. They are not exploiting the labor of others. They're the ones who are producing everything that we use in our daily lives. These are the people who make the trains run. These are the people who make the cars, make the roads. Everything that we use, consume in our daily lives, it comes from the working people. This is the least parasitic class on society, and yet, because the entire system is built upon an exploitation, a monopoly over the labor, the work of these people. They have no representation. They have no representation in parliament. They have no representation in political parties. They have no representation within the state. So the state is organized in such a way that the labor, the hard work of this productive class is exploited, and in return they are denied development. When we say Pakistan has not developed, we don't mean the Pakistani elites. The Pakistani elites, if you look at the housing market in Dubai or London or elsewhere, you'll see that they've done pretty well for themselves. It's a success story. But when we say Pakistan has failed, we mean the middle classes, the working classes, people who actually have to work to put bread on their table, and it's they who are going hungry. It's they who don't have access to clean water. I mean, about 80 to 90% of people in Pakistan don't have access to clean water, and this is working people. We have a World Bank report that says 45% of people are now living below the poverty line. That means that they do not know whether they'll be able to get their next meal or not. About 40% of people die due to waterborne diseases, diseases that the West only knows in Charles Dickens' novels from the 19th century. Similarly, unemployment is rising, agriculture is stagnating. So working people are experiencing a catastrophe, and also they feel, many of them feel there's no future when you have 25 million children out of school. I mean, a certain future is foreclosed for them. That is also the reason why we hear about so many people risking their lives to get to the shores of Europe and drowning in the middle. People from Pakistan have repeatedly tried doing that, and nobody likes doing that. It's their desperation, because these are hardworking people. If they were given a chance, and you can see that in Europe, or Pakistanis who work hard, they do well. In America, they do well. In Saudi, Dubai, like all of these countries are built by the labor of Pakistanis. But in Pakistan, their labor is exploited massively in these societies as well. But imagine if we were able to give them a dignified life in Pakistan and use this kind of pool to develop our technology, to develop our industry. Pakistanis would be living lives of dignity, and we would not be humiliated by institutions like the IMF that basically are dictating almost every aspect of our economic life. So the working people and what happens to the working people is a central question, and we're failing our working people, and this is why Pakistan's economy is where it is.
Now, following up on your earlier response, some may argue that Pakistan was on the upward economic trajectory, especially under the regime of General Ayub Khan, and it has been touted as a great example of development. Uh, and it was only because of the civilian politicians and the democracy which led to the demise of that developmental regime. How would you respond to that argument?
Well, I think it's just a factually incorrect argument. That development in the 1960s was a kind of dependent development on the US. It was a parasitic form of development. Those business families that owned everything, basically the monopoly of the 22 families, and Mehboob ul Haq Saab wrote that report where he exposed that kind of concentration of wealth that was happening mostly in West Pakistan. It not only created class conflict within West Pakistan, but also between the West and the Eastern wings, which eventually led to the tragedy of 1971. Also, this entire great boom, so-called, that so many economists used to tout. The decline started by 65, 66 when the relations with the US started cooling off. So it was a totally path-dependent development that was dependent on the whims of the US. And this has been the major problem, the question of sovereignty, despite the fact that that successive governments like to brand anyone who's a dissident a traitor. If you look at our relationship with sovereignty, that's been very weak. We only develop when the US is ready to use us for some kind of geostrategic purposes. So initially, in the 50s, 60s, it was tied to the Cold War. And again, as I said, after 65, 66, those relations started cooling, and the economy also started crumbling. Then in the 80s, we had the Afghan jihad. And once the Afghan jihad was over, the economy was shattered. And then once again, in 2001, we had the war on terror. So, these are these flows of dollars that we were dependent upon, they were very much tied to wars in our region, to geopolitical conflict in the region. And that is how this development took place. And in this entire process, I think the fact that in the 60s, 80s, and 2000s, we did not have representation, and these dictators limited the scope for democracy. It really hurt us. Now, imagine if during the Afghan jihad, we had a functioning parliament, we had democratic governments, and if there was a serious debate on what needs to be done, not just the history of Pakistan and Afghanistan, but of the entire region would have been different. Similarly, after 9/11, we changed our policy over one phone call. And before that, Cito Cento in the 1950s, these were military pacts with the US that were never discussed in parliament. But what these dictatorial decisions did is they locked Pakistan onto this path where it depended upon dollars that were associated with wars in the region. And that is the worst way to develop, because even when you're developing, your development is tied to destruction in the region. And that cannot be sustainable. And if an elite depends on these war dollars, then they don't have to improve schools, they don't have to improve universities, hospitals, they don't have to import or create the latest technology. They don't have to basically compete with the world. They can simply seek geostrategic rents. And this is what our elites have been doing. And this is why we are where we are.
Thank you so much, Ammar, for sharing your perspective. This is Danish Khan signing off.